Welcome back, everyone. Moving forward with our agenda, we will proceed with session 2, Social Agents of Transformation. This panel highlights how transformation happens when different levels of governance and society mobilize the potential of universities as engines of knowledge, innovation, and impact. Our moderator for today, for this session, will be Professor Esteban Romero. He will take the floor once again to guide this discussion and present our speakers. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Welcome you again. I'm afraid we don't see you, but we know you are there. So I hope you enjoy this session. This session that is titled Social Agents of Transformation. So connecting with the previous keynote and the opening speech we had, the idea of connecting universities and territories is the center, is the focus of this roundtable, with a view from different institutional level, trying to promote different innovation ecosystems where universities, mostly public universities, are able to generate a narrative of public-public collaboration in order to show citizens how we are able to add value to their needs, to their lives. And I think that makes this session particularly important. So let me explain briefly the structure of the session. We have a total of around 1 hour for this session. The format will be conversational. We will begin with a first round of initial contributions from the speakers, 5 minutes each. After these initial interventions, I will open a round of questions that I will pose to the different participants. And of course, in the meantime, this is just to get some time for you to think about questions, about the reflections that you want to share. Then we will give the floor to you all to make it more participatory. So let me introduce one by one our speaker. First of all, Íñigo Arbiol. He joins us from the United Nations level. He's Deputy Director of the Secretariat of the United Nations Local 2030 Coalition, a United Nations system platform that promotes the localization of the Sustainable Development Goals through partnerships between governments, international institutions, youth, the private sector, academia, and civil society. He holds a PhD from the University of Deusto and has also advised the Basque government and the government of Spain on sustainable development. So the floor is yours. Please, Íñigo, go ahead.
Thank you, Esteban. Gracias. Thank you also for the invitation, and congratulations to the University of Granada for the anniversary and for bringing this question, which is increasingly becoming a priority for international organizations such as the UN, which is how we can, research and innovation can really contribute to transforming local and social environments, right? In the United Nations, and particularly in the United Nations Local 2030 Coalition, as Esteban mentioned, which is the platform that the UN has created to put all agencies, we are 14 UN agencies that are working at the localization of SDGs. There is a kind of motto, simple conviction, right? That is that the challenges are global, but they are ultimately won or lost at the local level in the territories, right? That's where really we're going to have the solutions of the problems, right? Whether we talk about climate change or we talk about inequalities or demographic challenges, housing, digital transformation, whatever we're talking about, economic resilience or whatever, those are experienced locally. We understand that and that's the mission of the Local 2030 Coalition, right? So ultimately, our mission is to improve daily lives of people. And people live in the territories. They don't live at the supranational or national level, right? They live as probably the councilwoman knows very well, right? And also at the local level, we think that the trust in the institutions is where it's been built, right? And where ultimately sustainable development becomes tangible, right? So the most of the growing part of our work in the UN in terms of localization, it's now focused on analyzing what works, where, and why, right? And in that, a key fundamental thing is the role of universities. Because universities, of course, you generate knowledge, of course, but I don't think this is the most, probably the largest contribution, right? Or it would be a mistake to define universities as a place of producing knowledge, right? There are 2 or 3 elements that I wanted to highlight in these few minutes, right? The first one is the role of the universities, and when I mention universities, not speaking about your great institutions, I'm also speaking of small universities in territories in the global south that are very, humble in their size and the number of resources, right? But one of the things that they create is collective capacity. And because they're basically educating people who work in public administration, will run businesses, who will be leading civil society and research institutions, right? So in general, they are shaping and strengthening the territory's ability to understand the challenges and their priorities, right? The second thing is that universities do in our understanding, particularly in the global south, it's they create spaces of trust. So because being very honest, what we see is that nowadays problems are not just technical problems that we can solve just with technical solutions. They are very often coordination problems. And we need spaces where these constituencies you mentioned before, the governments, the businesses, the civil society, the citizens and the researchers can get together in a shared vision of the future, right? And that's for us, the university, an added value of and let me give you an example, right? In the UN now, we are promoting a tool which is the localization blueprint. It has 5 drivers, right? Which is how we help local actors, particularly local regional governments, to advance localization. Those are active citizenship, capacity and innovation creation, strong partnerships, strategic investment, and continuous learning across territories, right? And if you have a look at the university's role, they are in the 5 of them, right? Because the universities are building capacities, are fostering innovation, of course, but they are also strengthening partnerships, spaces of trust, right? And they are contributing to evidence that is improving investment decisions and connecting global networks with local ones, right? So moving on to the last minute that I was indicated, in our experience working in territories around the world, that the universities are not just helping how to transform the territories across the world. They are also answering why this transformation, right? Because as we speak about innovation and so, competitiveness, technology and so, in our understanding of the territories we work in, innovation is a means, right? Technology is a means. Even finance is a means, right? The goal ultimately is to build societies that are more inclusive, more sustainable, more just, right? To somehow reinforce the social contract, right? And let me finalize this first round by saying that in our understanding, perhaps the greatest challenge that we are facing, it's not in this decade. It's not basically to produce more knowledge, right? I think it's how to more effectively connect the knowledge to the decisions at the territorial level and delivery for the people, right? Because what we see, and particularly in some places in the global south, is that when territories are failing, they don't fail because of lack of ideas. No, they fail because institutions and partnerships are not capable of turning those ideas into collective action, right? And we can discuss that later. But very honestly, very few institutions are better positioned than universities to contribute to that task of putting everyone together, right? So I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inigo. Now let's move to the European level. And I think it's particularly important that Hugo Almeida is with us because he's going to incorporate the rural dimension. Sometimes we don't think about the rural dimension from universities. This is probably the next frontier, let's call it. No, I mean, we need to generate development also in those places. So let me introduce Hugo Almeida, that represents the European Commission. He is Deputy Head of Unit for Rural Areas and Networks at DG Agri, where he works on European initiatives related to agricultural innovation and rural development, among other themes. His work focuses on strengthening knowledge exchange, cooperation, and innovation across rural territories in Europe.
Thank you very much, Esteban. And first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, for inviting the European Commission and DG Agri in particular. And I would really like to congratulate you for this excellent initiative. I was just starting because Beth was complaining that when she started, you said almost everything. So imagine me after you, Beth, and Inigo. So I will try to put some...
wait until it's hello.
Some rural aspects here. So as you mentioned, I work in the unit that deals with rural areas and networks. And in particular, one initiative that I'm going to explain, that it's the European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture. And as Inigo just said, at least for my experience, the challenge that we have in front of us is rarely the lack of knowledge, in fact, because we have a lot of knowledge. The real challenge is to make sure that the knowledge that reaches people, that is shared effectively and leads to practical solution. And increasingly, when we talk about agricultural innovation today, what we are talking about, in fact, it's about territorial innovation. And the challenge that rural areas facing today, being demographic, economic, environmental, or social, cannot be tackled by a sector alone, in fact. Require an ecosystem that connects agriculture, business, education, research, civil society, and all local actors that involve them. So let me start really with a simple observation that we have in Europe, that for decades we have produced excellent agriculture research. Yet for a long period we faced what we call the innovation gap. It means that research results that never reach the field, and on the other hand, you have practical problems from farmers and rural territories that never reach the research agenda. So you have two worlds operating with different language, different time frames, and different incentives. So the Europe response to this challenge, or at least DG Agriculture approach, is built around three main pillars. The first one, it's the interactive innovation. Since 2012, we have been moving from this traditional knowledge transfer model towards an approach where innovation is created together. Farmers, cooperative researchers, the rural communities, all working together from the beginning of the project to identify the challenges and design solutions together. And as I mentioned, the most visible tool that we have, it's the EIP Agri operational groups. For the moment we have, this, just briefly to explain, are multi-actor, rooted local, multi-actor partnerships, rooted in local territories and supported by common agriculture policy to solve practical challenges. Since 2014, when it started effectively, we have more than 5,000 operational groups working together to try to solve practical solutions. And by the way, Spain is one of the most active member states dealing with operational groups. And since there, we have seen multi-actor projects improving sustainability, developing new value chains, helping rural communities to diversify, or establishing living labs, which bring people together to drive challenges at territorial scale. What it matters in this project, it's not only the technical result, in fact. It is, of course, important, it is essential. But what really matters also is that people learn how to innovate together and co-create solutions that work in practice. But the experience that we have is that projects alone do not transform territories. And that's why the second pillar of our approach is the ecosystem perspective. What we call AKIS in agriculture means agriculture, knowledge, and innovation systems. And under the current Common Agriculture Policy, every member state is expected to strengthen its AKIS system by connecting research, advisory services, education, farmers, and public authorities to make sure that the knowledge flows in all directions. And the universities here play a crucial role, not only as producers of knowledge, but as key nodes within the innovation system. And the third pillar is networks. The EU CAP network, the National CAP network, and since 2003 we have also established the Rural Pact, really help to connect people, share experience, and disseminate innovative solutions across Europe. The role that we have, the idea is very simple. Make sure that good ideas do not remain isolated, and knowledge reaches those who can use it. So let me conclude with one final thought. In fact, our ambition is not simply to fund innovation projects. It's to build lasting innovation capacity in rural areas. And don't forget that a quarter of Europe's population lives in rural areas, and these areas represent 3/4 of the EU territory. And here, really, I would like to address the universities represented here, and be aware that rural areas really needs universities that engage behind the campus, work with local actors, and help translate knowledge into action. If there's one lesson that we learn in Europe in the last decade, is that innovation does not travel alone. It needs people, it needs trust, and it needs networks. When those networks really work well, knowledge becomes a shared resource for transforming the territories.
Thank you so much, Hugo. Now we will remain at the European Commission level, but now we move towards Sevilla, because with us is Carlos Torrecilla, who is Deputy Director of the Joint Research Center in Sevilla. And also I'm very proud and happy to welcome you to your alma mater, because he's from Granada and he studied at the University of Granada with a background in physics, engineering and software engineering, and more than 15 years of experience in digital technologies, innovation policy, and evidence-informed policy making within the European Union. So, Carlos.
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for organizing such a nice event. For me, it's really a very special day. Yeah? So I'm from Granada. I'm going back to my alma mater, to my university. So last time I was in an event of the university, it was 30 years ago. I was a different person, so for me it's really nice. It's also very nice to be here with Hugo, because that way we are two colleagues from the European Commission and we can distribute the questions. So he takes the difficult ones and I take the easy ones. Jokes aside, I would like to tackle 3 points. First of all, the need for innovation and why places matter. Second, what can be the role of the universities? And third, a plea for science for policy. After Beth's keynote, I think we can all agree that Europe is in a difficult situation. And we are facing basically 3 main crossroads. Out of these 27 liberal democracies that Beth was mentioning, most of them are members of the European Union. So we are in a situation in which we have a very privileged way of living in Europe. But this is not for granted. So for Europe to keep this privileged situation, we are facing three crossroads. On the one hand, we need to make sure we succeed on the sustainability of our way of producing. So we need to go towards our goals of making us a neutral emission continent, as stated in the Clean Industrial Deal. But we need to do that while keeping the competitiveness of our companies and being able to compete in a very first global market. And we need to do this, making sure we guarantee our strategic autonomy, in particular with regards to the main technological challenges that the world is facing. And there is only one way to do that, is innovation. But innovation does not happen out of thin air. Innovation happens in places. Because Europe cannot afford wasting any single bit of talent that is spread all over Europe. And places is where all the different actors of the governance coincide. The European, the national, the regional, and the local, they happen in places, and the places is where government meets the actors of the so-called quadruple helix: academia, civil society, and private sector. And places are different. Even if we have the same percentage of talented people everywhere in Europe, the conditions that every place are different. So this means that innovation has to be different in every single place. And in those places, innovation happens in an ecosystemic way. And this is why ecosystems are key. And when we speak about ecosystems, we all think about Silicon Valley. And it will be great to have plenty of Silicon Valleys. But I do believe that the strength of Europe is not the fact of having 1, 2, or 3 Silicon Valleys. The strength of Europe is the myriad of medium-sized ecosystems that are able to specialize and compete in partial areas. And if you think in one of the most recent innovations coming from Europe, which is the vaccine for the COVID, it was developed in Mainz. Mainz is a city very similar to Granada, medium-sized city with a long-term established university and specialized in biomedical sciences. Very similar to the place where we are now having this meeting. So innovation is key, and place matters, and place around or organized in an ecosystemic way. And what is the role of the university in all of this? At least from my view, universities are one of the more stable territorial hooks you have when it comes to innovation. Universities provide, in a long term, students, researchers, and infrastructures that are mainly focused on innovation. And it's not only that universities are the most important territorial hook, they can act as owners brokers, because universities are by definition independent, don't have a political agenda, and don't have a commercial agenda. So they can act as the middle person to bring together governments, industry, and civil society. But what is the problem? The problem is that out of the 4 missions of the university, education, research, give and provide economic growth, and give back to the society, the first 2 have a very strong system of incentives, publications, projects, while the other 2, they don't. So this means that out of the 4 legs of the table, 2 are very strong and 2 are weaker. And this makes me come to the last part of my introduction, which is the need of hooking the university in what we can call science for policy. The credibility of a scientist giving a message is 3 to 5 times bigger than the one of a politician. So hooking our policies on science is key to make sure that we bring our citizens with us. And to do so, we need to make sure that the university can develop incentives for the other 2, and in particular, to make sure that our policies are grounded on science. So the university needs to understand that we need to get our hands dirty and get into science for policy, which is not the same than science for politics. So it's basically making sure that our policies, our public policies, are grounded on data, evidence, and science. Thanks.
Thank you, Carlos. Now let's move to a national level, Spanish national level. Ana Elorza is a strategic project director at the Spanish Foundation of Science and Technology. A scientist and expert in science diplomacy, she works at the interface between science and public policy and has contributed to the European science diplomacy agenda as well as to the development, and I think this is a very important contribution, to the Spain's Science and Technology Office at the Congress of Deputies. So please.
Thank you. Thank you, Esteban. Let me say thank you for inviting me, for having me here. Thank you, President of the University and Coimbra Group. I'm really honored. I cannot talk about what I prepare. Everything is completely, non-updated right now. So let me just say that what we are trying from the national government is to put in place all these very important advices that already talk about. How do we do these things? Let me tell you that we have seen a report from the UK where they saw that the influence of UK universities in the national parliament was just the 8% of the whole portfolio. The rest of the influence was coming from the private sector. What are we doing wrong? That is our question. What we are trying in the national parliament is to support an office for science, technology, innovation, where we take all the knowledge that is coming from the public universities, public research centers, the public for the public. As Beth was, preaching, we need to understand that this knowledge should also be important for the public service. So we are trying to establish a permanent office where you talk with the whole scientific community, all the academic community, and you bring in to the parliament what is on the agendas of the universities. This is my work. This is what we are trying. And this is something that the artificial intelligence cannot take us, because we're talking about parties here. We're talking about people talking to people, experts talking to members of parliaments talking to experts. It's a dialogue, it's a conversation, it's not a transfer of knowledge. It's more than that. It's that you ask a question, you answer with the knowledge, the scientific evidence that we have on the table, and maybe the politician will tell you, this is not the right question. This is my question, this is my need. So you need to listen also to the members of parliament in order to do research. We need to change our mentality. It's really a cultural shift. We need to work in a more sophisticated way with new interfaces at the institutions in order to be stronger, in order to update the quality of democracy in our institutions. We need to create what a very important philosopher in Spain, Inerarity, says it's collective intelligence. That's what we need. How do we do that? It's very difficult. There's a lot of models. Here in this panel, we are several levels, of institutions. In every single topic that I face in the Congress of Deputies, it could be prevention of suicide. More than 4,000 people die in Spain because of suicide. It could be cancer. It could be cybersecurity, rural development. We had so many reports. Every single report says the same thing. You need to have all the different levels, from local to national to European, in order to solve this topic. Because the law is coming from Europe. You have to have this law in Spain. You have to talk to the local people. So we need to understand that we need to build these permanent interfaces at the institutions in order to be able to talk with the community. From the scientific and academic side, we have to change our incentives. Of course, publishing is important, but we need to understand that if you do science advice or development cooperation or whatever you're doing to have an impact from your job, you need to be valued because of that. So it's changing the whole system, is understanding that to be a scientist or a researcher or a teacher in the next century is a different job. You need to have an impact, you need to be connected, you need to talk to, of course, members of parliament, but also to administrations, to local administration, to regional, so the job is harder and needs new incentives in order for the university to adapt. So what we are trying here is to get this conversation in a stable, permanent interface in the institutions. That's what we are doing. An important thing for me also is that we need to understand that we have to collaborate among disciplines. Beth was also pointing that if you have a wicked problem to solve, you cannot just have, like COVID, for example, you need to have also not just virologists on the table, but also maybe psychologists, also maybe economists. So we need to work also among us in the different disciplines. And I passed already my time, so
thank you,
I
Anna.
can elaborate afterwards.
You were talking about lobbying. I think for a long time we have been in an environment where private lobbying is very important, particularly also at the European level. Now it's time probably for this public lobbying, this good lobbying we can implement from also academia. So let's play the game, no? That's maybe the conclusion also.
Exactly.
So now let's go to the local level, introducing Ana Agudo. She's a counselor from Mobility, Citizen Protection, Urban Agenda, Sustainability and Next Generation Funds at the City Council of Granada. A telecommunications engineer by training, she has extensive experience in the management of organizations in both the private and public sectors, and currently works on some of the key urban challenges facing the city of Granada. So, Ana?
Well, thank you to the University of Granada for inviting me to this forum. Pedro, thank you very much for counting me in, because I think every time I come to one of these sessions, I take a lot more than I'm bringing in, which is great. And this is an example of, I think, what we're talking about here today. We don't have time, generally. Politicians, city councils, we don't have time. We don't have resources. We've got very little time, very little resources. And we need to focus. And that, for me, is the biggest issue we've got here in terms of using university and knowledge to transform society. I can give you quite a few examples of where I'm seeing this. We're collaborating with the University of Granada on a number of projects, like, for example, the European Capital of Culture. That's something that we are betting for. And basically, we are working on a very solid bid, and we are, we're partners in crime, if you can call it that way, on that quest. However, taking that idea and how we're working on that sense into other areas, I find quite difficult. And I would like to point out a few challenges. It's like the elephant in the room. What's going wrong if there is so much information, so much knowledge, and we're not really using it. The first one, from a local background, I think, participation from the citizens' side of things is not always representative. Quite often we find that the groups that come to the forums or the meetings that we organize are very few, and also they're always the same. And I can tell you that in this forum that makes it a bit more difficult to get information and to get solutions or ideas from populations that for us are key, like the youth, for example. Children, and then certain groups that are not accessible that way. So that for us is a big issue. Second, it doesn't really matter if a politician is keen to understand what is in the market. By the way, I want an office like what you're doing in the city council.
We talk about.
I love that. I'm always inclined to find out what's going on in the knowledge arena, calling it that way. What I find is that it doesn't matter what I say. Then, I've got some public workers that are the technical people implementing the solutions, And I have to convince them to open their minds and do things in a different way. And that in itself is a big challenge because they're also very tight on time and resources. So for us, that is a huge challenge because, what we're facing here is a transformation of public administrations. And that in itself requires resources. And again, we go back to the same issue, resources, resources, resources. Another element that I wanted to point out, as it has already been pointed out, is basically the alignment on objectives. I want solutions for my citizens. Sometimes the citizens I'm talking to are not necessarily that aligned to Europe. They don't care that much about climate change. Sorry to say this, but they care about it until they have to change something. And then at that point, they stop caring. And that is a huge issue, right? But that also happens on, the interests of university and researchers and us. Why? Well, because, quite often the incentives are based on publications, are based on papers, are based on IP, but not necessarily on implementing things. On funding is another issue. And what that means is that sometimes I need solutions, and you get to the certain point, but not beyond. And that also comes along with another issue, which is, how do we share resources? And what I mean there is, how do I request certain pieces of work and make it easy for you and for me to basically make that work without a 10-month, 12-month process on my side and the university side for a tender process. That, for us, is also a big issue. So, I think the elements are there. We could do a lot, but I think there is a certain spark needed for all of that to happen. And just to remind you of the, the last issue for us. I mean, our times are on 4-year slots, not beyond that. So sometimes it is difficult to pack something good and effective and something that really makes a change on a 4-year slot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. We have 20 minutes remaining, so I have prepared some questions for them, but I want to make the session a bit more uncomfortable for you all. So, building ecosystems often is about breaking agendas that you had already prepared at home, and then you realize we are out of time and they didn't participate enough. So, there are many topics that I could bring on the table, but I really prefer that you raise your hand and directly pose some questions or do some comments, introduce yourself. I think it's probably better if there are several persons who want to participate that we do it all together and then we go back in order to be able to have a broader view of what you said. So I don't know if I see any of your hands. Yeah, we have one there. Please, the other, this is a kind of mandate. Think about any kind of comment you want to do, please. So, yeah, over there, please, if you can introduce yourself and then go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to the panel. I'm Omar Garcia from Trinity College, Dublin. And I'm the chair of, I'm the chair of the Latin America Working Group for the Coimbra Group. And my question deals particularly in linking Ana Elorza's comments with Ana Agudo's, because I think there are, and I also have to say where I'm coming from the humanities, and in Ireland, where we've gone through a more recent change in what is Research Ireland, and how STEM, from the point of view of those academics like me who are in the humanities field that we have been left behind, or changes are affecting us directly. And Ana Elorza, you mentioned that you need to listen to members of parliament to do research. That worried me enormously. But then Ana Agudo was actually putting it from a different bottom-up perspective, which is what I like to implement for my working group as well, because I work in Latin America. Next to me is my colleague from Cuba in Cienfuegos. There are particular realities that affect us in ways that are not necessarily European-focused. For my group, I'm the linking one outreach to particular areas in what we could call the global south or global majority. And I think there are great links that we have discussed over the week, particularly in terms of where we place the Africa Charter, which actually applies perfectly well to other areas of what we could call, for lack of a better term, global south or global majority. Now, I want to say, to ask basically, where are the humanities within the framework of this European innovation? Because there's a time for me as a researcher, when I evaluate grants or I'm invited to review, one of the things that I hate seeing is cutting edge. We are doing cutting edge, strategic, innovative thinking. And I'm saying that from a perspective of someone who got a little over €1 million. I'm not complaining for innovation and agility. But where is that in terms of the plans for the humanities, the strategic thinking? How are the spaces being facilitated at high level for the researchers like me to actually have that conversation and not just at rector level? And as a bottom-up approach, and what are the opportunities to facilitate those at high level? For example, the Coimbra group is very well placed to actually have conversations, wider conversations that could open bottom-up with the European Commission and our Brussels office to be used strategically, for lack of a better term. And what are the elements of knowledge diplomacy? Because for a group like mine, knowledge diplomacy is key rather than just soft power that answers to particular interests. So if that probably will apply to across the panel, but I think I was just picking on the two Annas because I found the pain from Ana Agudo almost in making it work, and then Ana Elorza thinking of how strategic it could be for the university to respond. Sorry that it was lengthy, but...
Thank you. Any other intervention? Ludovic, here, please. And over there.
Me lo voy a apuntar. Humanidades, ¿cuál es el...?
Please try to be brief so they can have time to...
Thank you very much. My name is Lenka Rovna. I am the former member of executive board, now the representative of Charles University at SSH Group. I very much like the composition of the panel because you represent multi-level governance here, going from local, national, European, international. I was struck a bit by Ana Elorza Moreno when you said that laws come from Europe. I am professor of European studies, and so the laws, member states are responsible. So I wanted to ask you, what are your experiences with communication and cooperation among the levels?
Okay. Over there, and then Ludovic, and I think we are done, and then we go back to discuss.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Upton from the University of Edinburgh, and thank you for your presentations. Just two very quick points. I think, as has been discovered earlier, coming from the UK, the whole business about trust of politicians with universities, coming from a space where in the past we've had politicians saying we don't need experts, that still remains a fundamental challenge. I agree the vision is fantastic, absolutely, but there are some basic things in the political environment which still make this very difficult. My other point was I was very interested, coming from a library background, I'm a library director, that a couple of you talked about incentives. We know from negotiation with publishers, this kind of conversation, that the whole incentive issue in the academic space is very difficult. I'm quite encouraged, if you're seeing that too, can't we work together to try and do something about changing how we assess incentives so that we can really focus on the right things, about getting the benefit out of research, getting that recognized. I'm about to go into some UK discussions with one of the obvious big European publishers, and I will use this to point out, can't we look differently about how we do this to get real benefit out of what we do in terms of research? Thank you.
Okay. Ludovic, and then we go back to the table.
So, Ludovic Tilly, chair of the Coimbra group, and from University of Poitiers in France. So we saw in connection with the keynote speech before that, we need this cultural change as well within the university. And Esteban, you said, okay, now let's play the game. But for the game, we need players. So if universities are ready to be one of the players, are the policymakers really ready to do that? And the question behind is, we have seen in the past decades that there was this tradition to have a scientific advice that would really help policymakers to take what they think are the wisest decisions. And we tend to see this disappearing. So what is needed there? Should we sort of re-engage in the training of the future leaders or the current leaders? How can we also make sure that they want to play with us?
Okay. So now let's do a kind of final round. Later, if you are quick, I will ask for one sentence each to finish. But now you can address any of these topic incentives, that is very important. Things also like who is leading this kind of ecosystem should be the universities as honest brokers, or maybe other public administrations, different languages we use. I mean, there are many topics, and particularly I would like to address the issues that our participants pose on the session. So, who wants to start?
I can
Anna,
do that.
please.
Yes, thank you for the questions. First of all, I cannot think about a topic where you would think, how interesting is it, without social sciences and humanities being on board. Not a single one. So it's not that you need them, it's that without them, you don't understand the topic. You can talk about, I don't know, contamination. We know the technologies, we know what we have to do, but what you don't understand is why people behave like we behave. Why don't you protect yourself? Why don't you listen to the things that we already know that are there? So it's not a matter of technology, it's a matter of social sciences and humanities. And this is the same for every single topic. I can assure you, we are having interviews for one topic with 30, 40 experts around the world, in Spain and international, and you need those people on board in order to understand and to give a broad picture, you know, of the topic, a state of the art to the politicians. Otherwise, it has no interest. This is my first response to your question. And I would say that in our network, we have 24 offices in different parliaments in the world. A lot of them are in South America, for example. We have in Chile, Mexico used to have one, Argentina also, but now it disappears. It depends on the politicians also to maintain these interfaces in the parliaments. The first office that was built in the US in the 70s. And France, UK, a lot of countries copy that office. So now we have 24, and some are disappearing, some are, you know, newborns, like Spain. Spain entered into this game in 2020, after COVID. You know, we realized that our parliament needed this interface. So there is this conversation, this diplomacy conversation about how do we bring knowledge to the public policy, to the parliament, and so on, in the world, in an international level. Just if I may say something about the incentives, I think this is a very key question. How do we change? Because someone was saying, how do we create demand on the politicians? Should we train them? Maybe we have to think the other way around. We need to train also the scientific community. And if we do trainings, maybe we should be trained together. We, policymakers and scientific community, not, you know, it's not that we know everything, we will tell you about this, and you have to be trained. It's not about that. It's about be trained to work on a different way. And I know it sounds very simple, but it's very difficult. About the incentives, I think European Union is working a lot on this. I mean, we are working on COARA, open science, you have already instruments to value and assess scientists without being obliged to pay to Clarivate. You can see OpenAlex, you can go to open sources to see if a scientist is a good scientist. You don't need to go and pay. So we need to move forward. We need to think in a different way, and we need to understand that as a scientist, you need to work with other stakeholders. And it's a cultural shift, is a completely change of mentality. That's why it's so difficult.
Carlos?
4 points I would like to bring, trying to tackle some of the questions have been put on the table. First, how to make sure that policymakers are ready, or how to make sure that the scientific advice remains. So for me, the first approach is to build stable and robust institutions that are embedded and are having the mandate of providing scientific advice. I work for one of those. I work for the GRC. I can give you an example. The Commission has around 35,000 employees. The GRC is a little bit less than 3,000. We are almost 10% of the Commission staff dedicated to provide scientific advice for the Commission. This is building inside the Commission the culture of scientific advice for policy. Am I saying that everybody has to build a GRC? No. But what I'm saying is that if you build upon the very good and solid scientific institutions you have in every single European country, and upon them you create the culture of science for policy, you have a starting point. The second one has to do with the role of experts. And I think we need a cultural change, and I very much agree with Anna in the following sense. From the scientific point of view, from the scientist, to understand that when you provide advice to a policy maker, the final decision is on the policy maker, which is the one that has the democratic legitimacy. You provide advice, but the decision is not on you. This is not a technocracy. These are democratic systems. The policy maker has the legitimacy to decide even against your advice. And this is frustrating, but you have to play the game. And for the policy maker, it's the other way around. It's very good when science gives you the reason. But what happens when not? And you have to accept that sometimes you might be facing difficult decisions. And if both parties play the game, then the science for policy approach works. Third one has to do with incentives. I would like to ask you if there is any way to reward a scientist that works within a public institution to provide scientific advice. There is not.
Yes, there is. In Spain, there is.
Or there is in Spain. But it's not the main driver. It's not the main driver.
I know.
The main driver, Anna, is publications and projects. That's the main driver. If I devote my career to do science for policy, I will have less chances than somebody that has published in Nature or led Horizon projects.
Yeah.
And my point is, can we rebalance a little bit and make sure there is an incentive? And the fourth one has to do with humanities. Humanities are fundamental, in my view. Let's take the topic of the day. Let's take artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is, by definition, an area where we need definitively humanities. How do we build trustworthy AI without philosophers, without experts in ethics, without political scientists? So, going for strategic technologies requires mandatory contribution of social science and humanity. So I would fight always saying that AI and technology is multidisciplinary. It's not only a matter of engineers. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Hugo?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I will follow up a little bit on Carlos on the incentives. And it's true that what we realize that the incentives aspect, we are really easily talking about financial incentives, but if we really want to make it work, we have to go a little bit out of only the financial incentives and create for each of the categories that we think that are important to participate different type of incentives. I fully agree with Carlos that for researchers and universities is pretty much on the scientific excellence that they are rewarded to. And as Matt mentioned, probably we have to change also to reward the impact of their work, the impact on the territories, the impact on the real stakeholders. For the other actors, like the social and economic actors, what we have to make sure is they are also rewarded when they participate in their projects. I saw, for example, for my EIP Agri operational groups, we just conducted an audit, and one thing that we realized, among the chain, the farmers were usually the only ones that were not rewarded for their contribution in the project. And that's one thing that we are trying to say. Why? Because this really put the ones that are really concerned by this research out of it. They said, okay, if it's too burdensome, and if, in addition, if my work is not rewarded, why should I participate? You don't manage to bring it. And then the public authorities, and here I think that the local ones are particularly important to be part of these groups, to participate in this innovation, interactive innovation. I think they all have the interest to see that their decisions will be backed up by research. And they should be always part of these groups. And just to finalize on one aspect that was a little bit mentioned, it's who leads, because in our conversation it becomes easily, who leads these groups? For us, in agriculture, it's not particularly relevant. To be very frank, we even don't care. What we want is that the composition of the group is good, and it tackles all level of governance and all people involved in the problem. That's why we say the success of this type of interactive innovation depends mainly on the quality of the composition of the group.
Okay. Thank you, Hugo. Íñigo, and then Ana.
Sure. On this, couple of reflections, not to repeat, but on the couple of comments that came from the audience, and going a little bit on back on. Let me. I don't know in English if this, but in Spanish we say abrir el melón, and I know we don't have time for then analyzing what's inside, but I think we have a problem of disconnection. And sorry to say this, but the university is very disconnected from the society. And this is part of something we need to analyze, because the transformation will not come with better projects or better people, better researchers. Those are indispensable, but not sufficient. If they are disconnected from the ecosystem, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. The transformation will not happen, and the impact will be very limited. And the capacity to attract resources will be very limited, right? Particularly if we are talking about public-private partnerships, right? And this we see, in your cases, probably it's not so evident because you do have your resources, etc. Of course, you fight every day for further resources, but in the global south is key because there are no public resources coming to universities, right? So this is one of the elements. And the other one, which deals also with this problem, this connection, is there is lack of ownership with the projects. You might have a wonderful thing that is really transformative, but this is not owned by the society. We are citizens in all this. For example, if we bring something like Impronta Andalucía, right, and the University of Granada on that, it's an excellent example. If Granada wouldn't be sitting here, and of course, she's representing the people, right? This would be very dysfunctional because we say trust. Somebody, sorry, we can't see you, but somebody there mentioned trust, right? How we bring policymakers in, ownership. Why? Because ownership will bring us a cycle that is long-term, that is not 4 years, that is not just for the electoral cycle, that is not for the time that you were elected, right? Because if the people from Granada is really demanding something on mobility, then the university can come with the other actors. But if there is appropriation ownership, citizens will transcend your 4 years in demanding this. And then university, which is also connected with the long-term cycles and not with 4 years. universities shouldn't be connected with 4 years, right? While policymakers are, right? But policymakers can be brought to an equation that goes for 5, 10, 20 years. And my last comment, and this is where the melon is open, right? This is directly linked, and Beth mentioned it before, democracy. If we have this longer vision, this ownership, this will prevent us from polarized speeches, anti-speeches, with some of these elements about whether we should be researching or not on climate change or not. Because if this is appropriate, if citizens feel that there's ownership, that this is a priority, politicians won't be able to change it. The university won't be able to research or innovate on something else, right? And policymakers won't be able to basically don't pay attention to it because it's demanding coming, right? So I think we need to connect. I know we can't do this in the next, 3 minutes, but I just wanted to let it on the table, yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Well, just a comment on that last one. The reality I'm finding from citizens, sometimes they say, oh, I don't want that much traffic. But then, what they want is that another person can't use their car. Their rights need to remain the same. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, there is also a difficulty on bringing those policies into people because people see certain parts of the whole puzzle. In terms of, the comment around social sciences and the importance of social sciences, I think, with the previous speech that we've seen, we were talking about democracy crisis. I mean, I think the issue is not that social sciences is not present, is that the issue is so big that we need to find a way to tackle it from the different perspectives. Credibility, polarization, you name it. Right now, we are in deep trouble and we need to find solutions for that. And perhaps that's something that we should be talking about and trying to find. But obviously, that issue requires a coordination and an agreement among different actors that at the moment need to come together to agree on that, which is a difficult bit. But, putting that aside, the other thing that we were talking about was, the incentives and how do we bring politicians to listen to researchers and also researchers to align to politicians. I think sometimes it's not about training, it's not about regulating how they relate to each other. I think it's about influencing each other. And that is a bit that we need to be clever about. We need to know each other better, to know what makes the other tick, and play that game. That's, the way we need to act on this, because it's not enough just to say, from now on, we're going to have to go through a training course that, will take us through what the university can give you. But that's not the point. The point is, from a political level, what does the university knowledge bring to my game? And I'm not talking about, what is written on paper, but what really makes us tick. And we need to be very honest about it for that to work. So those were the two contributions I wanted to make.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time. Just to conclude, I think at least two ideas that are important for me after listening to you and also with the conversations we have these days. Mainly with this territorial challenge, we have this university, impact university, we are trying to build. The focus is not our careers. The focus are societal challenges, are what is outside the walls of the university. Of course, this needs to be aligned with our personal careers and lives, but we shouldn't be thinking about us as the main character of the movie. It's not about that. And it's difficult. I know it's difficult because there are also other important characters there, and politicians and policymakers are a very important one, and we shouldn't build our relations with them from, let's say, mistrust mindset, thinking that they only have in their minds to win elections and they have incentives, the same as we have incentives, different ones. But we need to maintain conversations to understand how things can work, because from the academia, we are able to build projects in the mid and long run term in order to build a better society. And that also will help our political system. That's some of my conclusions. So I'm very thankful for your presence. We continue with the second roundtable. And thank you very much, and thank you to all our guests, and please a big applause for them.